Alright, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel Connor Unchained. Let's cover a bunch of stuff in the market today. I want to go over just a brief overview of looking at the charts yet again, but then I want to cover a very important topic here that, I think it's very important to understand, at least personally, how I have been approaching this market over the last few months here and why, even if we are going to get into some sort of crazy alt season, right, it's still going to be very key to focus on these things. And I will show you some altcoins that kind of back up what I'm talking about. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Bitcoin here, though. So if we look at Bitcoin, guys, still holding this trend. Altcoins are not, obviously, I don't want to say they're not bullish, but altcoins have been struggling for a long time. Depending on what coins you're in, things are still sitting, still choppy, still sideways. The market has been up and down for weeks, for months. Bitcoin's trend, though, is very clear. If we take this out, this is simply a break and a retest of a previous support, or resistance rather, turned into support. It's a classic move. Doesn't mean that Bitcoin's going to tank here. Doesn't mean it's just going to run into a new high. But I think if we got rate cuts coming soon, I wouldn't be surprised to see things somewhat accelerate going into the rate cuts. Rate cuts likely will be a sell the news event. So let's say in the next week, Bitcoin, it does dip one more time, double, triple bounces on support, then makes its way up. I think going into rate cuts, then we'll likely see yet again another pullback if it's going to happen, right? I think over the next week and a half, we'll probably have a decent run, market pricing that stuff in. But Bitcoin's trend, guys, is still holding. There's nothing I can say more than that, and this is still good for our altcoin bags, believe it or not. I don't. RSI is looking pretty good here too. It's been kind of bottomed out. I don't want to say bottomed out because it's definitely not oversold by any means. Last time it was oversold was February of this year, which, I mean, especially on a daily, if we get Bitcoin oversold in a bull market, that's usually going to be where your opportunity is for an entry. Bitcoin's still holding, looks very good. We got ETH still chopping. Aside from like this trend that it's been in for a while, RSI is slowing down here, but I think, it is just going to chop within this yellow range. I've said it a million times. And I think it's, aside from, even if it does dip again, short term, I have a feeling it is going to chop, continue to bounce until it finally gets that break. This is one of the biggest things I've been watching in the market now for months, is just waiting for that break into a new all-time high. And that doesn't even mean that it needs to run to 7, 8, 10K, like these people are thinking it will, which it could, but even just to see it hit 52, 54, 55, just to like indicate that this trend is clear, prices, candles are holding, it is holding a new all-time high. Because we hit this, we just wicked and came all the way down, right? We need to see the trend hold and build here, and it's going to do the same thing. If it pushes up, I guarantee it will retest back down into this area, and then potentially just go on one more leg. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that either. But day by day, we're just watching it, waiting for ETH to make that move, make that run. And Solana still holding this trend. This is why I draw these lines, guys. It's like sometimes you can just look at a chart and you can just like look at this momentum. You can draw it with your whatever the fuck tool this is called. You can draw it out. And likely in crypto, for some reason, trends often follow, especially when things get bullish, even for a short span of time. Those trends will do very well until a resistance is hit, an all-time high is hit. Then oftentimes we'll see a good sell-off, or sometimes it even breaks above it and then sells off well beneath it, something like that. So Sol is still holding its trend. We'll see what happens with it. I'm still projecting at least 230, 240, which is almost there. It's holding the trend. So let's cover market leaders though. So I put like a little thing together in our Discord today talking about this stuff. But I think it's just very important for you guys to understand and just to know it. So when I say market leaders, guys, I'm talking about coins in the market that kind of suck up liquidity in a way like launch pads. Coins that are launch pads, whether in a unique way, doing things differently than most projects. Either a launch pad or coins with a lot of revenue, um, making a lot of capital and using a lot of that capital to either buy back into tokens or use it for other ways to benefit its ecosystem. And I've seen it all across Twitter this week too. It's like I've seen the hype, it's hype, ENA, and pump. It seems like that's like this trifecta right now going on in the market. And personally, it's like I've seen that too for a while, and I actually agree with it because the coins that have been performing the best are the coins that operate under that idea, ones that are actually making a lot of money. It's like people are focusing their time and attention into the more fundamental or fundamentally strong projects right now. But when I say market movers and ecosystem leaders, the other thing that I'm talking about is mainly it comes down to narratives. The way that I've been investing for like the last year is I am purposely looking for new narratives that are not narratives yet. And especially when you combine it with really good token fundamentals like liquidity pairing, for example, like with Zora, like with Virtual, and we saw it last year. These are tokens that have liquidity pairing. They're driving value into their own token. Um, and these coins, usually are the coins that generate the most hype, especially when we are in this, new environment over the last year or two where launch pads just dominate everything. So if any coins create an entire meta in and of itself is one thing, because we got robotics as another narrative. And there's actually a new coin I'm just going to talk about today. Another narrative that could be something. We'll talk about the good and the bad. But there's different things with these coins that, make them run, that end up moving. So we'll cover some market movers to kind of give you guys a better perspective on this stuff. But a perfect one that I want to bring up is actually Launchcoin. So Launchcoin on Solana, this has had the worst, run to the downside for a long time. Ended up pumping like crazy though the last week and a half. Biggest thing with Launchcoin though, the reason why I watch this coin is the fact of, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is because when this did launch, yes, it is a literal launch pad. It launches tokens, but it sparks an entire meta behind it. There are, when ICM started moving, there were such innovative projects that were launching that weren't even focused on crypto. They were focused on different actual applications. People were launching stuff that we would never see in crypto normally. And it sparked an entire meta. And this is why studying the first mover coins, especially something like Launchcoin, where apparently a token flywheel is coming, it's been something, people are waiting on for months. But it is going to be a market mover because Solana still has most of the liquidity in the market. And especially because, I don't know, the meme coin trenches, I don't want to say they're drying up right now, but the market is waiting and fiending for a new meta. And if this could come back, this would spark a very strong utility meta on Solana. This is why Launchcoin, I think, is going to do well as long as they can deliver on what they're saying, and start, having other new participants drop tokens again. Another part of it, though, is sentiment. Sentiment, just for alts guys, is still up and down. I know there's a ton of bullish factors, to push the market even higher, push it further, and continuously push it, but alts are just not fully showing the stuff yet. Liquidity is still flowing between handfuls of coins very rarely right now. But this is where, if a coin sparks an entire meta, has good tokenomics, a good flywheel, all of this stuff combined, this is where I think it's going to be the best asymmetric bet. Because especially the way degens operate, if they see a new meta, they're going to be aping into the token, or like the meta itself that, starts to rise up. And especially something like Launchcoin, that when it was back here, it started a whole different meta that changed everything. Even though it's dead right now, it was a huge opportunity in the market. And now, especially if they got, whether it's buybacks, I don't think they're going to do liquidity pairing, but if they got some good fundamental stuff behind the scenes that they're going to change and work on with this, this is going to be the best asymmetric bet because if the narrative does hit, sentiment does get better, this coin is going to run. That is the best way to put it. If it is the market leader of a narrative, even if the narrative is not that big right now, those are going to be your best asymmetric bets in the market. That is also why I've been very bullish on pump for a long time. Pump to me though, I think it really is the most obvious trade in the market. Pump Fund created the trenches, created the entire type of bull run that we've seen for now over a year. Completely changed the entire way that people invest in crypto, right? And how launching a coin now is one of the most common things in crypto. And with a lot of buybacks, and I assume they're going to be doing more. And with a bottomed out chart, millions of revenue pretty much every day. Even on low volume, they're still making some of the top revenue in the industry right now. It's simple things like this. When they're clear market leaders in some sort of category, and I put pump in the category of just, the Solana eco and just the meme coin launchpad leader. Like, it's as easy as that. So I don't think it's going to stop. Yes, it could dip. I actually expect it to have some sort of dip. Maybe a pullback, something like this. Maybe it chops. But I don't see a reason why this cannot go back to its all-time high. And that's at a minimum. For it to break its all-time high, if we do get a really good Q4, I don't see why it wouldn't do that. One of the most fundamentally strong coins. And again, I say this because it's like even my own bias, not even liking Pump Fund that much. It's like you can't let that stuff get in the way of a very clear, obvious trade. But Pump Fund, again, another easy play. Very long term, but in Zora too, the reason why I loved Zora, same exact idea. This was a meta, or this turned into an entire meta. Very good tokenomics. As these last month or two, couple months, can't even talk today, have gone by. Obviously, price has now been up. Zora's starting to slow down a bit. It's starting to chop, starting to dump. But down here, no one was paying attention to it. It wasn't a narrative yet. This is when you want to be looking for coins that have really good token fundamentals. They had no unlocks for a long time back here. As we're getting into September now, they have their unlocks late October. But when we were looking at it down here, we weren't worried about those unlocks, because I assumed at some point it would probably run before that, and it did. But Zora is, an ecosystem leader. It created an entire new meta in the market, and it wasn't just, a trench meta, something that comes into Pump Fun or memes for like 2 hours. The entire market. This came out of nowhere and took the entire market by storm. Those are the coins that I like to look for and find. Hyperliquid. This thing they just have a beast of a flywheel, at least for their revenue and buybacks. That is why this will continue to go higher and higher. In Virtual too. Virtual just has not had as much hype lately, but Virtual had one of the greatest runs I think I've seen from a coin, over this entire couple year span right now in this bull run. Same exact idea though. AI agents were the meta. This platform operated like a layer 1, wasn't a layer 1. Drove volume and monetary value directly into their platform, into their token itself, which is why it sustained its pumps and actually pumped multiple X's, 5, 10, 20, 50x, versus just moving a couple percent or doing very small moves, because people in the market are actually aping into it. It is a narrative market leader. It was at the time. When you combine a coin that is early to a narrative, and again back here AI agents were still they just got started, right? When you combine being some sort of market leader with really good tokenomics, that's when you get these pumps in the market right now. And Bio too, same exact thing. This is why I watched this coin for a while, even though I'm still kicking myself. And I literally faded my own call. But Bio was same exact thing. This started moving. Why? Because people were hyper speculating on the potential for DeSci based launches. That is the exact reason why this pumped. It's obviously coming down now because I don't think the launches I think still went okay, but it's just that hype is already down. Hype is dying. It's all that speculation. And same thing, the tokenomics for it, I would say they don't have the greatest tokenomics. They do have a lot of unlocks and consistent unlocks, but the tokenomics for the launch pad itself, which is what people wanted to be aping into, right? They had liquidity pairing as well. All the agents were paired with Bio. So what would that do? That would drive more value into the Bio token. You needed to stake and talk about it. You needed to stake some Bio or Bio Eco tokens and talk about it on Twitter, aka a flywheel for attention, and then also to stake to then take more supply out of circulation. Like little things like that, they all combine in this type of market and environment. But Bio was just a new narrative that no one was paying attention to for a while. It was DeSci, and it's not new. It's been around for a long time. But for DeSci to get the attention like it did for the couple weeks, right? That was new. Same thing. It was just a new narrative doing something very new that the market hasn't seen. And that's where the potential started moving. Let me see here. So another one too I wanted to talk about and cover is actually OVPP, because this one I find very interesting. So OVPP specifically, this is a coin that we got into the other day. But the thing with it is why don't we just go to CoinGecko? OVPP is focusing on I guess you can call it the energy narrative, whatever you want to call it. Same thing though. This could be the first rendition that we see of some sort of energy token actually make a good run. They have pretty strong fundamentals at launch, very good partnerships. Already at launch 0.8. 80% of the token supply is already out. They do not have unlocks for a few months from now. Their first set of unlocks, I believe, is like 3 months away. Then another portion is like 6 months from now. So it's like when that time comes where unlocks hit, yes, that's when you'd really start to reevaluate if you want to be holding it. But for the time being, fundamentals look decent. They check out. The only thing with this, though, is the amount of paid shills I think that I've seen is insane. Like every major account on Twitter has been talking about this, which I guess in a way for me, I look at it when the fundamentals do kind of check out, and then you also have a ton of these KOLs talking about this stuff. It's kind of free marketing. And I'm not talking about just one random KOL. Like I've seen more than I think any coin I've seen in a long time have more KOLs, like big KOLs, like just consistently bull posting it. But this one was pretty interesting. And it's the same thing. I look at it as simply as fundamentals seem to check out from what I've looked at. And it would be a market mover. Again, it would be a first mover. And I don't mean first mover as the first token to ever try this narrative, right? But it's the fact that if this coin starts to run like it is, we could see an energy narrative. I don't even know what that looks like, but we could start to see that end up popping up out of nowhere. And what is that going to do? That will drive even more attention into this, because people are going to be like, oh, like that coin, that's a new idea, it's a new concept. Good fundamentals, whatever, people are buying it. Then we'll probably start to see maybe some energy scam tokens launching and people trying to catch beta plays to it. When it sparks a new narrative, fundamentals check out, at least to a point. Whether it's a gamble play or a really good hold, it's, those are where your best risk to reward in the market is going to be, is studying those first movers and ecosystem leaders. That is what I wanted to talk about mainly. And it's like, I even look at Aoki, guys. Like Aoki, I've been bullish on this coin for so long. It's had one of the worst charts for a long time, but I feel like it's finally starting to get a little more attention, which has been great. But Aoki, same thing. Robotics, I know for a fact, at some point will probably hit crypto very, very hard. But Aoki is probably one of the only robotics projects that is actually building something substantial. And I mean very substantial with what they're building. It's like Aoki and Peak are probably the only two you should even look at. But yes, there's still, questionable things with it. I mean, I don't really think anything questionable with Aoki. Peak, I know, has, I don't know if it's inflationary, but I know they have crazy unlocks as well, which is part of the reason why it's been down only for a long time. But same thing, it's like, I feel like the best risk to reward in the market is really focusing where no one is paying attention in finding these new market movers or first movers, ecosystem leaders, before people even see the meta. You almost have to front run not only just the token, but the potential meta behind it, because the meta itself is what's going to pump a coin as well. That's where you guys have to pay attention to this stuff. That's why, it's like I feel like I have the most random list of coins, whether on YouTube or Twitter. I don't see anyone talking about the random combo that I have all the time. There's a reason why I pick almost every coin here. You know, so that's how I look at it. Aside from like, I mean, Nillion I just put up there. That one's kind of interesting. Ray's different. Mamo's different. Those are kind of AI and DeFi, whatever you want to call it, for some of them. But I think it's super important to be focusing on the market in this way, because as you start to see new coins launch and new projects, if you see a coin that you think could spark an entire meta, that's where you want to be focusing your time. Because we are getting late into the cycle, at least I believe, regardless of what people think. And to be thinking that, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say not every coin is going to pull a 20 to 50x from here, because we could easily see a nuts alt season, but we are already starting to see Bitcoin dominance drop significantly, from its high, and I feel like not too much has even happened, right? Some coins here and there, yes, have been pumping and moving. I do think still I have my first target right around 54, just anywhere within this range, give or take a percent. But I literally just lost my train of thought. My fault. But I mean, I think still there's overall, things are looking good going into the next few weeks, next few months. Aside from some more volatility, classic. But I think Q4 should be pretty good. But same thing. It's just I feel like this late in the cycle, especially with the amount of liquidity flowing back and forth between shitters left and right, the amount of tokens coming out every single day. I don't think we're gonna see an alt season like we've seen in the past, where you go to CoinGecko, you pick a category, you just click the coin, you click buy, and you watch it do a 20x. Like, I think times like that are truly over. But I think just consolidating into the best risk to reward tokens is going to be your best bet, and that it's going to be the tokens that front run a meta or kind of create the meta in and of itself, like most of the coins I just talked about here. So that's what I wanted to bring up, guys. I think it's super important to focus on this. Not all of your bags need to be focused on, the market movers, but this is how I've been analyzing and watching coins. I personally haven't really called too much lately, aside from just new coins that I think have really good fundamentals, which especially lately, things that have been launching has been straight up scams, dog shit. There's really not been anything worthwhile launching, probably since OVPP, and it's still incredibly high risk, even though, they have a partnership with Circle too, which I think is really bullish. But same thing, it's still high risk. And it's the same thing. We're taking it day by day in this market. Structure is still holding across the board for everything, even though alt sentiment is, I still feel like altcoin sentiment is at such a low point right now, even though there's a ton of good things that the market is kind of pointing towards. But so that's what's happening right now. So aside from, unless Bitcoin really just changes its structure, maybe it sends going into rate cuts, on the rate cuts news, and it does happen, maybe we do get a nuke, something like that. Who knows? Maybe we chop again. But we'll see. Take it day by day, like I said. probably 5 times now. But outside of that, guys, I appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.